Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Founder Focus from Startup to Stand Up, the fireside chat video series where we talk to interesting founders, discover more about them and their journeys, and hopefully pull out insight and inspiration for the entire founder community. As ever, my co-host Matt Mower, fresh off a relaxing week in Devon, I'll have you know, is back in the chair just in time. Matt, how are you feeling? Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed?
Good morning, Tom. Yeah, unusually for me, yes. Yes, I am.
Excellent. That's as long as you're refreshed and ready to go, that is great. Because we have a very, very interesting guest with us today. We have Dr. Nick Pryor, psychiatrist, mental health campaigner, and founder of the community Minderful. Nick, it is wonderful to have you with us. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks, Tom. It's fantastic to be here. I think it's so important that we are more open and honest about the journeys that we take when we start a business.
That sounds awesome. This is absolutely an area that is common to every single founder. And in this day and age, with the way the world is right now, founders are facing perhaps some of the hardest challenges they've ever faced. So all of the good sense and wisdom and empathy that you can give us today will be most welcome. As ever, Matt has the questions. Matt, do you want to get us rolling?
Sure. Nick, so question one. Looking back, what was the light bulb moment that seems most significant at the outset of your founder journey?
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, very important question, because I think that the origins or that initial purpose that gets you into the business is so important for the actual success of the business in the long term. For me, it was very personal, and I will probably touch on it a bit more later, but it was my own experience with mental illness, living with bipolar, that made me suddenly realize, or it dawned on me 3 years into working as a doctor, that actually the service we were providing wasn't good enough. I wouldn't have been happy to have received it myself. I wouldn't have been happy for my mother, who lives with bipolar, to have received that care. And that really catapulted me, or pushed me into making some riskier decisions in my professional life, and deciding that actually there were more important things than treading the path well trod. And that's really what got me into working at Minderful.
Although I came from a very different background, I can remember that sense that whatever it was about me, that the agency land world that I lived in, somehow I didn't quite fit, or I got to a certain point where I thought, I'm not sure I quite fit here. I'm not sure I'm going to get the opportunities that I want, and that I was better off venturing out on my own and trying to find that happy place where I could work sort of productively and happily for myself. So that definitely resonates with me.
Yeah, and I think the other thing for me was reflecting on my own mental health journey, and realizing that I was one of the very lucky ones in many ways. I did have a very supportive family. We could afford at times to go private to fill in the gaps. And it was just recognizing that actually the vast majority of the population were really struggling when they had a mental health crisis. And really what Minderful is all about is trying to enable more proactive, preventative approaches to looking after the mind. Because, you know, you talked earlier, Tom, about the macroeconomic kind of the bigger picture for businesses at the moment. But we know at the moment for healthcare, we're facing, you know, a multifactorial kind of disaster zone, where we've got an aging population, we've got more expensive healthcare interventions, and we've got a more unhealthy lifestyles that we're leading. That means that the way in which we provide care at the moment isn't sustainable. And I think the view that I've learned more and more on my journey is that maybe it won't be me who solves that problem, but being part of that ecosystem is still of value. And I think that can be a useful kind of principle to try and hold in the back of your mind as a business owner or an entrepreneur, is that actually, even if, you know, we know that the odds are against us, the stats tell us that, but actually there's still huge value in being part of the bigger piece.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, to think about it as an ecosystem. I mean, I'm a founder who's experienced a number of mental health challenges along the way, and there really isn't an answer, but there is an ecosystem of answers. And seeing how you fit into that ecosystem, I think, is a really important way of not trying to boil the ocean, pick a piece of the problem that you can actually tackle meaningfully. Because I think a lot of founders end up trying to solve too big a problem and just don't make enough traction with it. So I think that's a really important way of looking at it.
We started off, you look back now and you think, my God, that we were quite naive. 5 years ago, we thought that we could create a direct-to-consumer app solution where we could build people's wellness routines, and there was some good logic to it. We'd done some good kind of early testing on a small community, but the realities of trying to create positive behavioral change, and actually trying to get large scale solutions off the ground, it's very, very difficult. And what you'll notice with our journey is that we've become more and more differentiated and focused in our offering. And then obviously there's always that opportunity, especially if you've built a good brand and other elements of the business, to open up later on. But that's certainly the route that we've taken.
Question 2. What did you learn from establishing your product market fit?
Yeah, so I think product market fit, I remember when we started out, the term just seemed a bit, didn't quite understand it, 5 years ago. It kind of felt like this elusive term that someone had probably in a library come up with, this acronym, this, or this MVP or product market fit or whatever it might be. But as you start going on the journey, you start to understand why these terms are so important and why so many founders talk about them. For us, we had some false starts. And I think it's very easy as a founder to, it's almost confirmation bias or a kind of desire to see the picture as in the way that you want it to be seen. And you can imagine, you can believe that a couple of one-off flashes in the pan are those moments. And that can be very costly, because it means that for another 6 months or another year, you're heading in the wrong direction. So it took us a good 3.5 years to reach properly what I would call product market fit. And that was having kind of pivoted from a direct-to-consumer app to a blended B2B workplace wellness solution. And that only really, I can say justifiably, that we hit our product market fit when we'd actually won over 20 clients delivering workplace wellness solutions into that level of, or that kind of bucket of clients. I think it's easy to get persuaded by 2 or 3 here or there, but you've got to try and find that statistical significance, or that point where you're like, actually, that this is happening time and time again. We've got there.
Nick, you hit on something there that I discuss with founders a lot, which is how to judge ourselves when we're on the right track, and how to pivot mentally, especially when we are all the sort of people who have gone into doing this because we have a burning desire to achieve a particular thing that was in our mind. Do you, from a medical point of view and a mental health point of view, what helps us stay open-minded to whether we are on the right track or whether we need to move? Is it about listening to others? Is it about, what is it?
Yeah, really good question. I think the other difficult, and I will answer that, but what comes with this point of being clear on your direction and analysis and making sure that it's also just, we know how constrained our resources, and it can often, and there's a real fine line between being that kind of self-determined individual, just striving and not letting any distractions get in your way, and that comes with advantages. But there's a middle ground, and I think for me, organically, it's been that building of around 6 to 10 people who I can turn to for that point of reflection. Some in kind of more mentorship roles. So I've had some amazing mentors along the way. One including a guy called Professor Tony Young, who's head of the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Program, but also other people like Martin Ritz and some other, and Phil McSweeney from the community as well has been fantastic. And it is, it's those touch points that are important. But if I'm honest, I think I could have done more in that regard. I think it's come about organically, and I probably haven't. I've had more value and advice around me that I could have used, but I haven't had the time or the focus to actually make the most of it.
That's a great answer. I just think it's the thing that perhaps keeps a lot of us awake at night, is our own uncertainty with ourselves.
Yeah, and I think that's really important around how lonely the journey can be.
Question 3. What support or resource has been most significant in helping you on your founder journey?
What comes to my mind often is my co-founder. I don't think I could have done the journey on my own. I think it's such a you're putting so much of your heart and soul and mind into something that to not have someone there kind of not holding your hand, well, effectively holding your hand, but just keeping you sane and making you realize that you're not the only one, I think can be hugely valuable. And I always advise that when I do speak to people looking out to start off right now. I say a co-founder can make a huge difference. So there was actually 3 of us who co-founded the business, me, James, and Ed. Ed, for other reasons, has stepped back more, but has maintained an advisory role. And I'd say him, just because he knows the business through and through, is working full time on it for 2.5 years, and just having someone who knows the journey we've been on, and then can actually be a very helpful. What we do once a month, co-founder update, the 3 of us, and we review the business, and that can be really valuable. And I'd say that's another massive lesson is, and it's pretty cliche, but it's, when relationships change in a business, it's very easy for them to sour and for you to kind of create a negative energy. But actually just giving people the respect that we all deserve and the time, generally speaking, if you're doing something that's positive, people will want to continue to contribute. And I think keeping people on side, keeping that momentum is so important. For me, it's all about the people. We've touched on this a bit already. I live and breathe off people. I'm very much an extroverted person. We've learned more and more at Minderful the limitations and the frustrations of being a remote first business. We've remained like that for efficiency and cost savings, but we know longer term that we want to change that. And it's always on our away days. We try and get everyone together once a fortnight at least, that I leave and I feel 100% better about the business, because as problem shared as a problem solved, you're carrying a lot as the founder or as the leader or as the CEO, a lot of stress and a lot of responsibility on your shoulders. And I'm someone who does have a tendency to overthink, and I'm probably creating problems myself that don't exist. And it's often when I'm with my team and we're having a coffee, we're having a smile, we're actually just taking the piss out of this big problem we've got. And actually suddenly you can see it in perspective, and it's not that thing that you were worrying about last night. So for me, it's all about the people you put around you. We're still a tiny team at Minderful. We have 3 people on payroll, 3 people working quite significantly freelance, a kind of core team of about 8 of us in total. And the way in which we've recruited as well has been very organic. But fundamentally, everyone in the team is very aligned with the purpose. Nearly everyone in the team has experienced some form of mental illness at some point, not necessarily severe, but they know what it feels like, and that ties us together in a very strong and powerful way.
Nick, a quick question. I feel like sometimes I make my life particularly difficult because I'm a solo founder. I'm also a rural founder. I live in the countryside, which has always been very important to me, to be close to nature and get all the benefits of that, which does keep me relatively sane most of the time. But it does mean that I often feel quite disconnected. It's not easy to get around to places and actually be with people in person. And actually, just last Friday, I met up with a fellow founder for lunch locally, and I immediately came away from that feeling like several problems that had been rattling around in my head now felt much easier to carry. So do you think we're missing out as founders in this Zoom age? Do you think that actually a local aspect to having local support, someone you can just actually go and sit around the table with, is perhaps something that we're lacking?
I think it is actually, yeah. And I think that there are kind of more historical kind of old ways in which people have networked with businesses, aren't there? Whether it's kind of Chamber of Commerce and stuff like that. But I think there is a bit of a a gap between organizations who've been agile enough to actually adapt to the needs of founders like yourself. And I know it'll be very relevant, not only just to founders, but I think to people working within the startup ecosystem more broadly. And I think, there are definitely members of our team, like our head of partnerships, who's out in Northampton. That would be very relevant to him as well. One thing that we've noticed is that, and we're always really passionate about at Minderful, is not just being in this bubble in London. So our biggest kind of strategic play about a year ago was to invest a lot of time and resource into Northamptonshire. One, because we had a staff member there, but two, because we felt that there was actually more of a need for the way our work out there. So I think, interestingly, we're kind of thinking along the same line.
Question 4. What's the most surprising thing that's happened to you on your founder journey so far?
So one morning I was working with James, my co-founder, in person in London, and we turned on the App Store, and totally independently, we had no idea it was happening. We saw that Minderful was app of the day on the App Store, and for us that was, we'd been working probably a good year and a half on that app, spent a good probably £250,000 in total when you reflect on it all in terms of resource, the tech we had to invest, and it felt in that moment like all of that had been worth it. And it was a huge, kind of bow in our cap to get that. But that was one of the kind of the false dawns, in that, yes, we had this amazing moment of credibility. We managed to get a couple of thousand downloads off it. We tried to ride that wave a bit, but actually, really, it was yes, it was a voucher of approval from Apple. They liked the look of the app, they liked the concept, they liked what we were doing, but we were still miles away in terms of those important engagement and LTV retention kind of metrics. And I think, but for that couple of weeks, and actually for that morning when James and I were there, we both kind of turned around and we bear hugged each other for a good couple of minutes. It was a moment that I don't think will get replicated, and it was very special.
That is wonderful. Can I ask, I don't mean to be in any way negative about that, but it does make me think of something, especially for someone like myself. I am not a volume business as a founder. And so one of the things that I find particularly challenging mentally is that I have these big highs when something like that happens, followed by often fallow periods, which can last sometimes weeks, where it feels like not a lot is happening. And I find that cognitively quite stressful. Have you got any recommendations for anyone else out there who struggles with those ups and downs?
I think there is just an overall piece around kind of resilience and just kind of preparing yourself and perspective. So a lot of it is just giving yourself the space to have a kind of what I would call a kind of baseline, so you know where you are. So instead of it feeling like this is the first time it's ever happened, you can reflect back and you can say, well, actually that happened last year, and 2 months later we won our biggest contract, and life carried on. It's a lot about just creating that normalizing, I think, what is actually probably quite a inherent part of the process.
In sales, they say you should always keep a journal, because you need to be able to reflect back and go, when did these things actually occur? They didn't occur now, they occurred 3 months ago, good or bad. And that thing of being able to reflect and go, well, this happened before, and this is how it is super useful. So I think there's some really good stuff in there for people.
And there's nothing better also than just, I mean, I'm probably use it too much to almost to the point of devaluing it, but I'm very honest when I've made mistakes, and I will, there's one good example at the moment, is that we invested in HubSpot, the CRM platform, probably about a year and a half ago. We weren't ready to use it. We probably had a whole year of not using it properly. That ended up costing us about 15 grand. I would quite like that 15 grand in our bank account right now. But my hands up, I was 2 steps ahead of where we should have been.
Question 5. What's the North Star that you're currently aiming towards?
So the North Star for us is fundamentally, we want to be part of the movement that makes organizations recognize that culture and wellness are essential for business performance. We've moved away from our old mission. Our old North Star was to get to a point where it was accessible and easy for people to build personalized mental wellness routines. We now have, as for a part of the process of pivoting and moving around, has realized that actually an individual is a long way away generally from being from scrolling through the app store and thinking, I want to build a mental fitness routine. I want to start looking after my mind proactively. And actually, the way to do it, though, to still keep that at the core of what we're doing, is to find the right structure, the right relationships to tap into. And we think the workplace is the right place to go there. One, for actually the individual, but also from a business model point of view for us. So, and how do we actually get to the point where businesses take this seriously? People or organizations tick boxing, kind of glossing over, pretending that they're doing the right things, but to actually get the investment needed to create effective culture and wellness, we think we've got to tie it closer to business performance. We've got to make it that narrative impossible to ignore. And that means not only leaning on the heart, but it means really tying down those ROI metrics. And the truth of the matter is most of the data is out there. It's just it hasn't been presented or put into a cohesive enough narrative to win over a lot of leaders to make those decisions. And that's where we're focusing our energy at the moment.
It's all very well for employers to talk to employees about their behavior and optimizing that for their own well-being. But at the same time, it's that systemic behavior within a business that I agree with you is that's the angle to attack, because it's all very well saying to people, well, you should be often, going for a walk in nature, after work. Well, if your email's still pinging away with that employer because they don't turn their email server off to protect you from work communications after 7 p.m, then are they really helping you?
Exactly. And I think that is an area that we're trying to differentiate ourselves as well from the space, because for good reasons, the wellness space has become quite crowded. Lots of people, one band shows, kind of lots of people out there, but actually they're not giving it this full integrated whole system approach. And we see culture really as, how does, like you say, it's a systemic, how is the organization working? And then we see wellness as more on the individual side, and it's how do you tie those two together? That is where we really specialize. We also, I think it's worth saying, just as a general point, is trying to create positive behavioral change is really difficult. And actually, if we look at the success of most digital only solutions, it's very limited. So even companies like Headspace and Calm now, you look at their LTV metrics, you look at their engagement metrics, they're really struggling, and they've had to change their business models going into businesses. That's where most of the revenue they get now. And they're also having to recognize that you need to support things around the digital solution. And that's what we're trying to do a lot is, yes, we have this nice, sparkling, lovely looking app that is app of the day. And we know fundamentally the approach and the system there is backed by science. It's been developed by me using the biopsychosocial model. But actually, it's only by getting, like you say, the culture and the right kind of initiatives in place in the organization in a more analog way that you can really amplify and actually get the effect that we're looking for.
We're back to ecosystems again.
Exactly.
And I think when you're dealing with systemic problems, ecosystem solutions are the way to go.
Do you know what, guys? I could continue this conversation for hours. Sadly, we must wrap it up there, but let's finish on a note of behavior change and say to people, go download the Minderful app. It is, it is beautifully engineered. It works really well. There's a ton of good content in there. So if you're going to do one valuable thing today, found a community, go download the Minderful app and get into all of the good practices that Nick has introduced to you today. Nick, thank you ever so much for being with us. And I hope that's been a wonderful episode for the founder community. I think there's lots to take away. But Matt, Nick, thanks ever so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Really enjoyed it.
And to all the community, we will see you on the next episode. Bye for now.